Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness, sponsored by Hierophant Publishing, Hampton Roads Publishing, and Insight Events USA, producers of books and events for the body, mind, and spirit. Freeman Michaels here with Sandi Stewart. Sandi.
Hi, Freeman.
I'm so glad you're joining us. We've missed you in Barnett, so now you're going to call in for at least a couple shows now and get everyone back in the groove.
Yeah. It's good to talk to you. It feels good to be connected to California. This Toronto is fabulous, and it's a really big shift from the beach to the city, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, there's so many cultural differences. I'm curious because we're going to have a conversation today about health and well-being, specifically as it relates to food. So I'm curious how you're used to Malibu restaurants and the Malibu lifestyle. What is the difference between the Malibu lifestyle and the restaurants and the kind of California thing and Toronto? Have you noticed a difference?
Not so much. No, not that different. Where we're staying in Toronto is specifically a very young, hip kind of area, and there's juice bars and a lot of healthy choice kinds of restaurants, and I see people walking up and down the street in their workout clothes. We can talk about it a little more with our guest, but on the way to Toronto, I stopped in Texas with our daughter Sophie. I accompanied her to meet her birth dad.
That's right.
And health and wellness and food in the south of Texas, let me tell you, is a whole different story. And it was it was interesting, and it was a little difficult also to, I saw how really locked in I am to my creature comforts and what I take for granted, and fruits and vegetables just being on at every meal, on every table. And it's not the case in this country, and I got a big eye-opener, I got to tell you. But Toronto's great, and there's fabulous restaurants, and we're enjoying it.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest, because I think it's time to talk about this topic in a broad way.
Yeah. So I'm very, very happy to have JJ with us today. JJ Virgin is the voice of scientific research in the world of nutrition and wellness, and she's been that voice for 25 years. And for the last 10 years, she's been the voice in holistic and functional medicine. And I want to talk a little bit about functional medicine. I want to know more about that. Her approach to weight loss is really interesting. It's scientific. Her belief is that your body is a chemistry lab, and there are scientific methods to help you discover the areas of weight loss resistance, healing your metabolism, and becoming well for life. And not to be intimidated, Freeman, but she is a member of Mensa and a chronic student. She's taken over 40 grad courses from six different grad schools and doctoral schools.
And she reads books like she eats kale.
Yeah, and she writes books like she eats kale.
That's right.
So, JJ, hi. So good to have you.
You too. Good to be here. And I'll tell you what, I love the restaurants in Toronto. They're amazing.
Yeah, there really are some. They take their food very seriously here.
Okay, now wait a minute. This is interesting because I grew up with a mother who has some food sensitivities, and one of the big challenges with my mother is finding restaurants that will work. So when you said, JJ, that you love the restaurants in Toronto, you just threw off a presumption that I had that going to restaurants for you, because I know a little bit about the way you operate in terms of food. I've researched your work, so I'm wondering, how do you go to a restaurant? And so tell me about how you love the restaurants in Toronto. I'm curious.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a lot different than it was 10, 20 years ago. It's really easy now because there's so much more awareness of gluten-free and dairy-free and food intolerance, so it becomes much simpler. And what I just found in Toronto, like I'm thinking of one restaurant I just love, I just went with a bunch of friends, and they had grass-finished beef and wild fish, and I had no problem eating gluten-free and dairy-free and low-sugar impact in Toronto at all. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Now,
really
Sandy's already
fresh ingredient.
Yeah, Sandy's already juxtaposed that with Texas. So, this is a big challenge because there are places in the world where, maybe they are 10 years behind. So let's talk about how you navigate that gracefully, because one of the challenges, I know growing up with my mother going into restaurants, was that there was resistance. Not only resistance from maybe the chef, but also people around sort of judging that perhaps my mother was judging, right? That because she had these food intolerances and she had to really kind of navigate what on the menu was going to work, they kind of took it personally, not just the chef. I'm talking about everybody. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, and they also probably thought she was a little kooky and it was crazy.
Well, we were from California, so that's that.
Maybe because I don't know, but we understand things differently now, and it's become. I remember even 10 years ago, I was talking to a doctor, and he goes, that phony thing, leaky gut, and I'm like, it's not phony, babe. We've got testing to show it's really occurring, and it's way more than you realize. So, it's a big shift now. But I will tell you, I remember, I think it was like maybe 8 years ago, I was doing some work with Dr. Phil, and we took over a town in Texas. And I will always say, hey, you can stick me anywhere. I can always find something to eat. But in Elgin, Texas, not the case. It was such a challenge. It was amazing. So there are places that are challenging. I lived in the South, too, and it, a little challenging there, but I still figured it out. So you can do it, and I find that the chefs are much more easygoing and tolerant these days than they were 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and it's also a matter of economy. We weren't in many restaurants in Texas, but the people that we were visiting don't necessarily have unlimited resources, and so they were buying what they could afford to buy, and most of that came in packages. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of there was no fresh stuff around other than meats, which were delicious and cooked, barbecued all day, that were fabulous. But, I think that I sort of took it for granted that everybody could kind of afford to go to the market and buy what was good for them. I mean, I think they can if they're educated, and that's where your work is so important. But if you're not educated, you buy the 99-cent craft dinner.
Well, though, here's the cool part about that, because one of the biggest urban legends that makes me crazy is that it costs more to eat healthy. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have access to some things here in California that you're not necessarily going to get in a small town in the South or the Midwest. Right. However, look at Costco is now carrying organic and wild and grass finished. So there's really been a change because of demand. I went to the grocery store and I bought 2 carts. One cart, and I was I will say I was sort of sleuthing out what people were putting in their carts, because I wanted to get what an average family trying to eat healthy, but kind of normal, they were getting packaged stuff, would eat. And then I did based on what, I feed my family. And my cart, even though I put in grass-fed beef and wild salmon, was $36 less than the other cart. And I did not, I wasn't trying to stack the deck one way or the other. I was hoping that they'd be about the same. That was sort of my goal with it. But it wasn't the case, because when you eat a more plant-based diet with some clean, lean protein, and things are not processed, it's actually the processed foods, for the most part, the salad dressings and the packaged cookies and things start to cost money and add up.
Well, there's also quantity, too, right? Because when you're buying junk food, you tend to consume more junk food.
Yeah, it makes you, all this stuff has been orchestrated to make you, it's engineered to make you hungry, right? I mean, if you look at what high fructose corn syrup does, or any sugars, because most sugars are about half fructose, depending on what they are, unless they're agave, in which case they're almost all fructose. Fructose will make you hungrier. And all sugars are going to make you more insulin resistant, which will make you hungrier and better at storing fat and worse at burning it off. So they are absolutely set up that way. And then you look at adding in gluten. And gluten and dairy are and sugar, the three of them are trifecta of opiate hits on your brain. So basically you're drugging yourself and you just want more and more and more.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I always refer to Barnett eating the Happy Meal. And, I'll start sort of picking at my fingernails when I get nervous. And his version is, let's go for cake. And he immediately, he wants sugar when he's nervous, immediately. And actually, we read your book years ago, JJ, and went off of the 8 or 6 things. I forget how many there are. And it was really, really, really difficult for him. He went into a big depression for the first couple of weeks when he had to get rid of sugar. And then his energy came back in such a wonderful way that, he felt fabulous. But I was really surprised. It was really like a drug withdrawal.
Oh, it is a drug withdrawal. It is look at it. It's our number one drug of choice worldwide. We started at an early age. You look at the infant formulas loaded with sugar. You look at a lot, like go to the store. If they've pulled the sugar out to try to make it healthier, which is a real joke, they put in the artificial sweeteners, and those are worse.
Right.
But you look in the store because exposure equals preference. If you eat sweet, you want more sweet. So we're just training our kids at an early age to drink, to eat more and more and more sugar, and we're dulling their sweet taste buds. So they have no more sweet sensitivity. But you can actually get that back in, honestly, 2 weeks.
Well, I want to talk about that piece of the puzzle. One of the things that I think is brilliant that you recommend, and I'm going to give it away, and then you can talk more about how you came to it. The idea that sour is the sort of way of confronting sweet. In other words, if your addiction is to sweet, you can counteract that by using sour. And I want to talk about how that works.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give a shout-out to my girlfriend, Donna Gates, of the Body Ecology Diet. All of us health experts, we hang out together and share what's working. And we were doing a cooking show, and we were making fermented foods. Now, I will admit that I hate fermented foods, except for wine and chocolate, which I adore. But for the most part, I don't like kimchi and sauerkraut. I just ick. And they are some of the most healthy foods you can eat. And because they help restore the good bacteria in the gut. But it turns out, she was one that told me, she goes, if you do sour, it takes your sweet tooth away. And I'm like, well, okay, how else could I do sour besides having to do these sauerkraut things that you're making with me that I'm, I feel like Tom Hanks in Big trying to eat. But lemon juice, I do this little thing. I do a little lemonade drink where I use fresh squeezed lemon juice, a little glutamine powder, because that's an amino acid that actually makes your brain think that you had something to eat and can take both sugar and alcohol cravings away. And then if someone needs to start tapering down their sweet, we'll do a little bit of either xylitol or erythritol or stevia. And then I throw in some fiber. Fiber is one of the most amazing weapons for helping with sweet as well, because it stabilizes your blood sugar. And a lot of the reason people are going for a sweet is their blood sugar dropped.
So what's the fiber that you add to the lemonade drink?
Well, the easiest one is to do something like chia seeds. Just something simple. I have a fiber product that I use at home of my own called Extra Fiber, but it's not something you have to get too technical with. Literally use chia seeds and be done with it.
That's fantastic. It's all really interesting because, again, I want to track back to maybe the psychology of this. For me, so much of the patterning is, as you mentioned, Sandi, around kind of coping, using food as a coping. You mentioned with anxiety how Barnett goes to cake. I actually go to salty and crunchy. When I'm feeling anxious, I like potato chips, right? Because this is just conditioning. And then celebrating that sweet is celebratory, right? So for me, when I'm feeling good, I start to crave something sweet because I want to celebrate. So that's the piece. We're going to have to take a commercial break here, but when we come back, JJ, that's the part I'm really interested in, because I understand there's sort of, seems like there's two threads. One is understand the chemistry and biology for sure, but the other piece that seems equally important, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, at least to me seems equally important, is what's the associative, sort of psychology that then hooks us into this patterning. So we're going to talk about that, but we're going to do that after the break. So stay with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. I'm here with Freeman Michaels. I'm Sandi Stewart, and our guest today is J.J. Virgin. And before we broke for the break, we were talking about, yes, there's a chemical connection, of course, to what happens when we eat certain foods in our body, but we were starting to explore the idea of the emotional or the patterning connection. And you can change what you eat, but how do you change how you associate certain foods and what they mean to you in order to change what you eat? So we'd love to hear what you have to say about that, JJ.
So it's interesting. I was on this show, a TLC show called Freaky Eaters, and it was me and a psychologist, Dr. Mike Dow. And it was about people who were hooked on certain foods. By the way, we did not have one person who was hooked on Brussels sprouts or broccoli or salmon. Crazy enough, it was usually potato chips or French fries or cookies or ice cream, right? Mm-hmm. And his whole thing was, okay, it's your mother or it's your family, and mine was it's your biochemistry. So I'm still going to look at this, and I did genetic testing at the time through a company called Pathway Genomics that did the spit test, and they could actually tell if you were a super taster, a bitter taster, if you had more of a sweet tooth, which is really cool. It doesn't mean that you then, have to give in to it, because you really still have the power over it. But once you know that, you understand how you need to live and your margin for error. And what I've seen is when you described that you liked salty and crunchy like chips, Freeman, and then Sandi, you described that your husband liked cake. Well, actually, they're the same because they both turn into sugar, and what they both do is drive serotonin into the brain to give you that feel-good brain chemical. So they're both doing the same thing. So I always look at them and go, okay, well, what's the hit that's happening from that? And then what you can do is say, this is boosting my serotonin, or maybe this is raising my oxytocin, or maybe, this is raising my dopamine. You can actually just mimic that stuff with activity. Mm-hmm. And so I think the most important thing, because nature hates a vacuum. If you say, when I get stressed, I'm not eating cookies ever again. Well, if you don't give yourself an alternative activity or an alternative something, you're just going to go eat cookies again. That's crazy. So you have to find an alternative for that, and preferably something that's not food. Because I think we've gotten so used to reaching for food when we're actually not really hungry for that. We're hungry for connection more than anything else nowadays. I mean, I think we crave connection. If you look at the number one determinant of happiness, it's not cookies. It's being coupled. It's having great friends.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I have a question that I haven't really been able to figure out, and from what you're saying, I think it's probably biochemical. So I can go all day, wake up, have a healthy breakfast in a reasonable portion, have a healthy lunch in a reasonable portion. I'm not actually very hungry during the day, but I eat because if I don't eat, I hit a certain point where I get to the low blood sugar and then I don't feel good, so I know I have to eat, but I don't have much of an appetite. When it comes to dinner time, I eat more than I probably need to eat because I go from being hungry to being full. And once I feel full, I don't want to stop eating. Like somehow I have it in my head that, if I just have one more bite of this, then I'll feel better. And so from after dinner till when I go to bed, if I didn't have any self-control or work or, as you say, exercise or do some breathing or do something like that, I feel like I could eat all night till I go to sleep.
It's so funny because you never hear someone say that in the morning. You never hear someone say, hey, I got up this morning and I just ate from breakfast all the way straight through.
Yeah.
I just snacked all morning. I think at night our serotonin's low, our cortisol's down, we're tired, and we just don't know what to do with ourselves. And especially, with women, the easiest solution is just to eat. I say just go sit in the bathtub for the rest of the night. You can't eat in there. But, I don't actually think that's biochemical. I think that's boredom and training. and really bad habits.
Yeah, so I like this. What there's actually language that I have for this. I mentioned before anxiety eating. So the option would be to consciously create a practice, a kind of self-soothing practice, bathing, meditating, maybe a cup of tea, something that has the same quality of self-soothing to replace the potato chips.
Exactly. Because that's what we don't do. We don't mindfully go, okay, what am I really hungry for?
Yes.
Because what you're really hungry for is not the chips. So what is it? Is it that you want to take time and just read a good book? What is the thing that you would do that would really nurture yourself?
That's a great question.
Well, and the other side of that is, what are you feeding? So, for example, when it comes to one's negative self-image, and sort of self-betraying around food, right? Because we've all done it. I mean, maybe you guys haven't, but I have. Where when I'm abusing my body, it's a direct reflection of some kind of trigger around shame, not feeling good enough, or so forth. So, what are your thoughts about that, JJ?
Well, it's interesting. Yesterday, I was getting a facial done, and this gal, I was like captive, and she figured out what I did, and I went, oh my gosh, now I'm here for an hour and a half. She asked me every question she possibly could, but it was good because I haven't been around someone who spoke like this for a while, and she talked about being good or bad.
Yes.
It was classic, right? It was a good day, it was a bad day, and I'm like, why don't we just get rid of that judgment in those words? And the reason I love uncovering your hidden food intolerances and designing a diet that will work for you for life, or lowering your sugar impact and finding how much you can really handle, is it takes all that out. It's now you're your own medical detective, and you're going to see what works and what doesn't. And then you say, well, if I eat this, I'm not going to feel good. So I don't think that I want to do this anymore. I can have a little bit of this here. And so it becomes a non-judgment thing. This is not about like being a perfect eater and having a good day or a bad day. Right? It's about making the choices that give you great energy, slow down the aging process, make you feel good, and then knowing how much you can get away with if you're going to have like a little bit of cake or something like that, so that you don't beat yourself up over it.
Yeah, the judgment can really absolutely get in the way. And also, I think another part of it is that most of us go through life, not most, but many of us, very split off. And when you're split off, you're not really in touch with your body. You're not even home. So you're not really there to find what feels good and what doesn't feel good. It's like at night when during the day, I feel like I'm involved in my life, I'm busy, I'm present, I stop, I take breaths, I check in, and then I sit down to eat, and somehow like I sort of get lazy, and then I'm kind of just like split off in this la-la land, and I walk by the fridge and throw another few of these in my mouth, or another few of those in my mouth, and if I really tuned in and was present, I would be more aware that I actually don't need anything. As a matter of fact, I probably needed less to begin with than what I had for dinner. So, why don't we use this as an experiment, Sandi? Okay.
You just stepped right into that, because you are a mindful, very present person. And my whole thing as I was listening to this is, what would it take for you, what would you need to do to be mindful during this time?
Right.
And why don't you make this your new project? And I find that the number one determinant, and there's been countless studies that have shown this, of people being successful on making a shift in their diet is to journal.
Oh.
And so what you do, and it really helps you solidify a habit. Right now, you just have a habit. It's just not a supportive habit, right? And you just want to shift that habit. So all you do is make sure that you are journaling your meals every single day and how you feel, and really focus on that evening meal and making the shift to where you want to be.
So I start with the beginning of the day, not just at night when I'm problematic.
Write the whole thing down. And here's why you write the whole thing down, because you want to look back and go, did I do something during the day that set me up for the evening? Just to make sure that you're not. Because sometimes if you don't do enough during the day and you go into the evening ravenous, then you're really going downhill. That's why I don't like there's a lot of diets out there that now have you skipping breakfast, which I find men can handle, but women not so well. We are much more finely tuned machines. We skip breakfast, we get angry.
Yeah.
So, we're not nice to be around.
Yeah. I think that would be really helpful, though, because I definitely notice that sometimes I get headaches throughout the day from time to time, and they come and then they go. They don't last forever, so it's not a tension headache. And I always know, I ate something. That headache is from food, but I'm not really aware of what the food was that gave me a headache, or maybe even more so the combination of foods I ate that gave me the headache.
And that is honestly why elimination diets are so critical.
Yeah.
And, because you have to start from kind of ground zero again. So when you pull the top offending foods out, which when I did all the testing, I used to do food intolerance testing, did it for years, and 90% of the people reacted to 2 or 3 of the same 7 foods, right? So that's why I came up with 7, because I went, let's make this simple. But you go back, you pull them out, you go back to a reset, and then you start and you work through one at a time, because it's impossible to do it the way that if you haven't gone through that clearing out, you look and you go, I don't know which one it could be, right?
Right. Yeah, I had that experience with your diet because I eliminated, and then when it was the week that I could put eggs back in, the thought of an egg made me sick. And I thought, that means that my body doesn't like eggs right now. And then a few months later, I was able to eat an egg, but I would never have known that because I ate eggs every day almost.
Yeah, eggs were an interesting one for me. I wouldn't have believed eggs, but I was doing food intolerance testing, and I went, well, I am really reacting to eggs. And what I found with testing was the top reactions for people were eggs and dairy and gluten. Then it was corn and soy and peanuts. And, of course, I had to deal with sugar because, sugar, especially fructose, that makes your gut more leaky, and gluten and fructose and artificial sweeteners and medications and stress all create the leaky gut syndrome that then sets you up for food intolerance.
I want to track back for just a minute because I think something you said earlier, JJ, when you were talking to the woman and you were trapped in the seat, as it were, the context for doing the investigation, the context for changing the patterns, for most people, it's a good or bad. Again, I'm kind of feel like I'm beating the same drum I was beating before, but again, I can't help but say it feels to me like all of this works if we can shift it to a positive context, and it all becomes a way to beat ourselves up if we're still coming from the idea there's a good and bad, and our fundamental orientation is towards beliefs that we're not good enough, right?
And that's why where this all really needs to start is with, why does this matter to you? Why is it important?
Yes.
I had a situation where I nearly lost one of my sons due to a hit-and-run accident, and I had to be in the hospital with him for 4.5 months while I was publishing this Virgin Diet book. And I'm the financial support for my family. So, I had to be there with him, and I had to run my business. And the only way I managed to pull that off is I walked in there super healthy, because I was there 12-plus hours a day, crazy amounts of stress. And that's what I look at with people. It's get out of the whole, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm bloated, I'm too fat. Get out of that and go, okay, what do I need my health for? Because I find for so many people, their health is holding them back from living the life they were put here to live. Weight loss and obsessing about food should not be your hobby.
Right, and it is for so many, isn't it?
And that's so sad. It's a prison. Yeah. And so if you flip it and you go, okay, stop all that. Let's look at, where do I really want my life to be? Just let yourself go, big dreams, as if, that what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Because you're going to need to be at your best to do whatever that is.
And before the crisis hits, because so many people, this comes, if it comes at all, it comes after the crisis hits. They have the heart attack. Right. They have something happen where now they really have to face it because they can see their life kind of literally flash in front of them. And the choice is, do I want to be here or do I not want to be here?
Yeah, and you can put yourself, I don't know, you can either look at things from fear or aspiration. Fear is a great motivator, but aspiration, when you lock into that and you get back those dreams, is the best of all.
Yeah, well, fear is actually not a good motivator for that very reason, that ultimately it just comes back to I'm not good enough and I didn't make it and so forth, whereas an aspiration or something that is intentional, that lifts the possibilities for our lives is not just functional, it's the only thing that actually is sustainable. JJ, I love your work. I think this new sugar book is fantastic. The tips in it are great. Can you give folks the information they need to access your material?
Sure. Easiest place probably is jjvirgin.com, because from there you can find out about the sugar impact diet and the virgin diet, and then the new project I'm working on, which is the Miracle Mindset, all about what I learned going through my son's life-threatening accident and what that can do to help you kind of face those challenges every day and become more stress resilient.
We'll have to have you back for that discussion separate. I mean, it doesn't have to be separate, but we've run out of time in this show. But I love that conversation as well. I know your son, it was Grant, right, that was hit by a car?
It's Grant.
Yeah. A few years back, and he wasn't even supposed to live, and he did, and he's back on his feet. I know you post a lot on your Facebook page about his progress, and that's a pretty powerful story. So I'd love to, if you're open to it, have you back sometime, especially if you're in the LA area.
Absolutely, and I get to LA quite often, and one day we'll even bring Grant around.
That would be great.
Media, it's fun.
That would be fantastic. I love that idea. All right, so grateful you spent the time with us today, JJ.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
And for those of you listening, stay tuned, because we'll be right back after the break here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, sponsored by Hampton Roads Publishing, Hierophant Publishing, and Insight Events USA, producers of books and events for the body, mind, and spirit. I am joined by my co-host, Sandi Stewart.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm so good. I love the conversation we were having on a lot of levels. I think I'm beating the drum of it's all context. Like, I understand the information is critical. I really get that. And we become more empowered the more we know. But I think for most people, the starting point, what's the context within which I'm making these choices? And so often the diet game is about proving that we're not good enough and trying and failing, and some craziness that has, because even if we know how many people do you know who know the information? They know it. They've read every book available, but it hasn't changed the patterning.
Yeah, I mean, I know it, and I know what sugar does to me. I know I get a headache when I eat sugar, and I eat sugar.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true. I love what she said about finding something else to get those endorphins going and get the dopamine going. And, it's just a lack of, I like thinking about it as a chemistry thing, like, oh, this is just a chemistry thing. I can create this in my own body. The other day I was on the phone with a friend who's a therapist, and we were talking, and she said, how are you? And I went, I'm just like stressed today. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And I was kind of complaining, and she said, do you want to try something for a minute? And I said, sure. And she said, I've just been reading about how shaking your body can really change your neural pathways and create a sense of well-being in a matter of minutes, more like seconds. And I said, sure, let's try. So she said, okay. And I was on the speakerphone. She said, just stand up and shake your body. Shake everything. Shake your head, shake your arms, shake your neck, your legs, your hips, everything. Just shake, 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 shake. And then stop. And I must have done it maybe for 60 seconds. And when I stopped, my whole being, it was as if I had done a breathing exercise for 20 minutes. I felt completely shifted. And I know that I made a huge shift in my brain. And in that moment, I couldn't quite grasp. I was back in my body, out of my head, and I couldn't grasp the ideas that were making me stressed the minute before. So it makes so much sense to me. If you can just shake your body and get back connected to core and relax, what you eat has such a huge effect. And the more present I can be and the more I can be in the moment and mindful when I eat, because I tend to get less mindful when I eat. It's sort of like what you were saying, sugar is a celebration. Oh, yay! And I sort of become a kid, and now we're eating this good, delicious food. And it's less mindful than the way I live my life. So I'm really going to take that in and, sort of it's just choice. Make a conscious decision in the moment. Why I loved her question, what am I really craving?
I think it's habit. I think, yes, it's choice, but then what we're talking about when the neurochemistry kicks in, we're in the groove, as it were, right? We're in the patterned experience that we are caught in addiction, and it is habit, and there is a sort of physical need for it at the point that's what the medication we've been using to, bump our serotonin and what she was saying about the sugar and the potato chips. Mm-hmm. So my sense is, or more than this, because I work with this a lot of times, is how do I create a practice that meets the needs that I then over time becomes a conscious habit? Because that's all a practice is, right? Mm-hmm. Any practice that we take on that we do over a period of, I guess it's 21 days is what a lot of the neuroscientists say, but whatever the span of time is, for me, it's a little longer than that. I find things that I've been doing for 6-8 months, I don't have to think about it. It's just what I do. That becomes the ritualized ways that I self-honor. And again, in this larger context of my commitment is to radically accepting and honoring myself. Mm-hmm. Not easy, because it's almost like there's an old default setting, and it's a pathway, literally like neural pathways, and there's the pathway I'm creating in service to this vision, this understanding of what I want in my life, and I flip between the two, which is okay. I think the thing is, how quickly do you get back on track? How empowered are we to create practices and repeat them in service to what we're up to creating in our lives, in terms of health or whatever it is?
And knowing that the situations that are there today, I sort of have this saying that it's never the thing that you think it is. It's never about the thing you think it is.
Right.
So there's something that is upsetting or challenging, and it triggers something very, very old. And when I can be aware of that and just stop myself and go, that was then, this is now. I'm okay in this moment. I will be okay in the next moment. But and I'm really, that's very up for me right now, because I'm in Toronto, and that's where I'm from, and that's where my family is. And so much of what I've been experiencing, I realize, is not about now. It's about then, and circumstances and situations are triggering that old stuff. And if I respond to it, I'm back then and there. And
if you react to it.
Yeah.
But if you respond to it, then my experience is a kind of slowing down. And my experience of that, because I go back to San Francisco and have some of those similar things come up, is if I can slow down and be very kind towards the part of me that's been triggered. And it's usually a part of me that didn't feel good enough, or didn't feel seen or recognized. Then it's okay. It can become kind of sweet. Barnett talks about this. Let me think of the language he uses. Instead of regret, there's a kind of, what's the word he uses?
Well, he talks a lot about loving all of the pieces. Just love them. Just hold them and love them. Love all of it.
Yeah, no, but this is a really interesting little piece of language. Something like remorse, but not regret. So there's a sadness in what could have been, right? Or a sadness in the way things were handled, given what I knew at the time. But I'm not regretting it, because I recognize it's all on the path to get to now. And the opportunity, of course, is to practice that deep, deep compassion for a part that we've judged as unacceptable or wrong or painful or whatever. And if we can move into relationship with it in a more constructive way, there's a depth and a dimension to it and a kind of sweetness to it that I feel is empowering.
Yeah, and it's a part of us that didn't have the tools then that we have now.
Totally.
So if we don't bring the tools to them, they never get them. But when we bring the tools to those parts of ourselves, we heal them and we bring them into the present.
Well, and yes, we heal them, we bring them in the present, and we integrate them so that when they come up, it's just oh, yeah, I'm hearing from that part of me. It's like parallel paths again. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting, just a kind of crazy psychology that I trip on, when I grew up, money was tight, at one point very tight. And so if you went to a restaurant and you ordered something, you ate it, right? And the idea of wasting, my mother was really adamant about don't waste food. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll eat something because I don't want to see it go to waste and I'm full. And that's a trip. So I have to actually negotiate in my own brain, it's okay, Freeman, you can throw that away. Mm-hmm. You don't have to eat that donut just because you bought it and no one made it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you have to eat it. You can waste the money, quote unquote, because that's the voice that's going off in my head. But again, the context is, how do I honor every part of my experience, not make anything wrong, but navigate it in this larger context of what is it I want to create?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That reminds me of your donut story. There's this book, I think it's called Skinny Girl, Fat Girl. And it's a book all about the differences between women that are fat and women that are skinny and their beliefs around themselves and food. And it's a really good book because it goes in a lot to self-love and self-judgment. But one of the things it said was, a fat girl believes that they were taught, and they still hold the belief that they have to eat everything on their plate because it's a waste. A skinny girl thinks, wow, I'm full. Why would I ever make myself uncomfortable? The plate isn't uncomfortable if the food stays on it.
Yeah. Jasmine always leaves something on the plate. It's fascinating to me. I watch it. But if you ever eat with her, and I know you and her have had many meals, so next time you eat with her.
I haven't noticed that, though. So I'm usually too busy eating everything on my plate.
I finish, you'll see there's nothing on my plate. But my wife always leaves something. It's very odd. But she's got a little thing that she's made up in her head, but it's more constructive. It works for her, you know? It's very interesting because I watch how she operates, and even some of the things that have a positive effect, right? Because her weight is not really, to say it's not an issue is just a lie. It's obviously an issue. It's an issue for everybody, right? So some of her neurotic kind of crazy behavior is partially what she's used to maintain her weight. So at certain moments, like when it's not convenient, she's got to go for a run. And I'm like, oh my God, we're doing this again. Like her whole life has been turned upside down because you need to run right now. And so, it's a real dance for her to say, I don't have to run right now. It'll be okay if I don't run right now, and make a deal with herself to run later or something, but because it kicks in that she's eaten too much, or it kicks in that, I don't know what it is, but there's God, the voices in our head are so loud, and to really navigate and create a voice of love and compassion and maybe even reason, a good reason, not a reason like ultra rational, but like, let me find a good reason for making it a self-honoring choice right now, because I'm so caught up in this crazy rationalized insanity, and look, going back to my mom and the food stuff, I don't know, something deep psychological goes on with her. I feel like it's a big control thing, because my experience is she overdoes it with the food stuff. Like she's always on some crazy, thing about what she's doing with food, and it's so obsessive, and it's like absorbs so much energy, not just hers, but everyone around here, trying to figure out how we're going to negotiate my mom's food requirements in a given day. It sort of spoils things. So, God, it's a balance, I know we just sort of turned the whole show, a couple times around, but I think that's life. I think that,
that's how I feel right now anyway.
It all gets layered in. We want to make it simple, we want to make it one-dimensional, and it isn't. It has complexity to it.
Yeah. Do we have a minute? Because I have a thought on what you said about your mom.
Go.
I don't know her, so this is not a judgment, but just from what you said, if everybody has to tiptoe around it, it's serving her very well, isn't it?
You bet.
Yeah.
My mom's big thing is control. I mean, that she wants to control everything. And
that's the way to stay.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we've actually kind of brought that up. She's adamant that that's not true, but, it is. So even if whatever she's going through is legitimate, there's still this piece of where my mom gets to be in control.
Yeah, because it can be legitimate and she could handle it and it doesn't have to be an inconvenience to anybody else.
Look, if we go with the 100% responsibility, we say, why are you creating this? And part of why I'm creating it is because I want control. Yeah. And that becomes a big revelation. Now, whether it changes the biology, it might not. Bruce Lipton in The Biology of Belief, this idea of epigenetics is that our body's responding as much to beliefs as it is to anything else.
Yeah.
And so we really are creating the world in alignment with our belief structure. And the biological effect is very real. So to deny it would be ignorant.
Yeah.
But this depth of understanding how we're creating that is a layer that I think is really critical.
Yeah, and even if you are creating it for a reason, once you become conscious and you give up the reason you're creating it and you don't go for the control anymore, oh, this is it, I have these food allergies, I'm just going to deal with them quietly on my own, they may magically go away because you're not getting the payoff anymore.
That's it. Yeah. And again, can I create a larger context for... I told this story last week. I'm going to tell it again because it's such a powerful illustration. So my nephew was in town from Montreal and we took the kids to Disneyland, which is sort of a painful experience. But we went early and we got on enough rides and we sort of handled everything. And we had gotten these, gotten the tickets for the big show at night early. So we had a good group to go in, Group Blue, which I guess is a good group because we got them early. And then we took off, went back to the hotel. We'd gotten a hotel because I can't do a full day of Disneyland without a break. Mm-hmm. And the kids got to swim and whatever. We went back and... Anyhow, the guy had said you could start lining up at 8 o'clock. He said, be sure you line up at 8. And I was like, okay, we'll line up at 8. And I'm kind of in my control thing because I really don't want to get into the challenges that come when it can get crazy at Disneyland. Anyhow, long story short, we get there at 8:02. And there's already
That's pretty good.
Well, no, there's so many people ahead of us. It was like, oh no, where are we going to be now? Anyhow, there was about two people ahead of us. And when we got to where we could line up and the seats were fairly decent, the view was fairly decent, this woman put out a bunch of sweatshirts. She was saving like a whole row. It was crazy. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. And I was like, you can't do that. And my wife is pointing over to this other area and she says, Freeman, let's go there. And meanwhile, I'm like, get into this thing with this lady about the injustice and you can't do this. And we were waiting in line and Jasmine's like, Freeman, what is wrong with you? Get over here. And so I came over and she's like, what was that about? And I was like, well, she can't do that. She says, Freeman, you're creating all this. And I was like, what do you mean? She did this. I do this where I have my injustice thing gets triggered. Mm-hmm. And she said, is your intention today to have joy and fun and so forth? Or is it to go battle with that lady? And I'm like, ooh, my intention is to have fun. Then what's wrong with over here? Now, granted, it's not as good as over there, but are we really competing to have the best? Or is this sufficient for us to have a nice time, enjoy the show? Even if you talk that lady into giving us those seats, I don't want to sit there. Not after you've bickered with her and confronted her and so forth. Right. That's not going to be fun for anybody. Right. And I was like, wow. And then later on, I brought it up again and I still went into my whole, what she did. And Jasmine like, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to do that? And I'm like, no.
Isn't it so interesting, our commitment to the brain just wants to go back to status quo. The brain is just a repetitive organ that just goes back. That's why we know how to brush our teeth every morning. Our brain just wants us to go back to status quo, and that's why the only way we can move beyond and take responsibility is with real consciousness and know, like Jasmine said, what choice do you want to make? Make it now, because your brain's going to always make the old choice for you.
And what Jasmine will say also about that situation is, Freeman, you create those situations, and I do, because I've got to
keep that alive.
Yeah, because I've got an internal battle about injustice and not fair and not being respected and so forth that finds people, that finds situations, and Jasmine just walks by them. Now, don't get me wrong. She has her own triggers and her own stuff. But this is not her.
That's not her.
The enemy is within, and that I find people in the world to represent those roles. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. My job is to choose. Do I want to be in that fight still, or do I want to be in a different experience?
Yeah.
And not only do I respond different when things come up that might be triggering, they just don't come up because I'm not playing. I'm not running that, because as long as I'm running that, there will be, if I want injustice, there will be lots of places to find injustice in the world. And it doesn't diminish how we might experience injustice in the world. It's just there's an empowered response, and that ain't it. Right? Hey, listen, we've come to the end.
Okay.
But you and I are going to have another show at some point very soon for next week, and we're going to get to chat more. So I'm grateful that we had this opportunity.
Yes, it's nice to do it. Well, it's nice to be in the studio. It's actually nicer to see your handsome face, but this is second best.
Right. Well, I'm glad we've got you here to support the show and keep us going. And for those of you listening, Sandi and I will be back next week, and you will hear our interview with whoever the guest is if you tune in here on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.